Chosen one, pause for just a moment, because the message reaching you now was not written casually, and it was not born from a passing emotion. The person you love has been carrying words they could not organize, feelings they could not silence, and one quiet concern they could no longer pretend was not there. They are not trying to create drama. They are not asking you to make an immediate decision. They simply need you to understand what has been happening inside them before the distance between you begins to feel permanent. Somewhere between the conversations that ended too soon, the pauses that lasted too long, and the moments when both of you almost said what truly mattered, something was left unfinished. They noticed it. Perhaps you noticed it too. And now, in the stillness they once avoided, they are finally admitting the truth. They do not want to lose you because of words they were too afraid to say. Don't skip this part, because what they regret most is not a mistake you already know about. It is the way they allowed uncertainty to speak for them. When they became quiet, you may have thought they no longer cared. When they stepped back, you may have believed they had chosen a life without you. But their silence was never as simple as it appeared. Behind it was someone trying to understand why your presence reached places in them that had remained guarded for years. You made them feel seen, and that feeling brought comfort, but it also asked them to become honest in ways they had never practiced before. That is where the confusion began. They wanted to move closer, yet every step toward you made the connection feel more real. They wanted to tell you how deeply you mattered, yet the deeper the feeling became, the more carefully they tried to control it. And without meaning to, they created the very distance they were trying to avoid. There is a particular moment they keep remembering. It may have seemed ordinary to you. A small exchange. A sentence. A look. Perhaps even a goodbye that lasted only a few seconds. But something in that moment stayed with them. They replayed your expression afterward and wondered whether you had already started protecting your heart from them. That thought changed something. It made them realize that love cannot survive forever on hints, delayed answers, and feelings hidden behind pride. Stay till the end, because there is one realization they reached only recently, and it explains why this message feels so urgent to them now. They finally understood that losing someone does not always happen through one dramatic ending. Sometimes it happens quietly. One unspoken feeling at a time. One postponed conversation at a time. One person waiting for reassurance while the other assumes there will always be another chance. They do not want that to become your story. They do not want you to look back and believe they never valued what existed between you. The truth is, they valued it so deeply that they became afraid of mishandling it. And in trying not to ruin something precious, they almost disappeared from it. Can you feel the contradiction? They cared, so they hesitated. They missed you, so they distracted themselves. They wanted to reach out, so they rehearsed the message again and again, then erased it before sending. Not because you were unimportant, but because you had become important enough to make every word feel dangerous. Yet something has shifted. They are beginning to understand that honesty is not danger. Vulnerability is not weakness. And telling someone they matter is not a loss of control. It is a form of courage. That courage is what they are trying to find now. There were nights when they imagined what they would say if you were sitting beside them without interruption, without expectations, without anyone else listening. They would not begin with excuses. They would begin with an apology for every moment their silence made you question your worth. They would tell you that your patience was noticed, even when it was not acknowledged. They would admit that your kindness reached them during moments when they did not know how to receive it. And they would confess that the possibility of you moving forward without them has become more real lately. Not because someone told them. Not because they saw proof. But because your energy feels different. You seem quieter in a stronger way. Less willing to chase clarity from someone who should have offered it freely. Less willing to remain inside a connection where your heart must constantly guess what the other person means. And they can feel that change. It has awakened them. Something important is waiting for you in what comes next, because this is not simply about someone fearing your absence. It is about someone finally recognizing the cost of their hesitation. They now understand that you were never asking for perfection. You were asking for sincerity. You were not demanding that they know every answer. You only needed them to stop hiding behind uncertainty and meet you with the same emotional honesty you had already shown. That realization has stayed with them. It follows them during ordinary moments. While they are working. While they are driving. While a familiar song plays unexpectedly. While they reach for their phone and stop themselves. They wonder whether you would still listen. They wonder whether your heart has already begun closing the door they assumed would remain open. And then they remember something about you. You have always been capable of understanding the truth, even when it is imperfect. What you could not understand was silence pretending to be an answer. They see that now. They see how many times you waited for a simple sentence that never arrived. They see how you may have interpreted their distance as indifference, even while they were privately overwhelmed by the depth of what they felt. This does not erase the confusion. It does not undo the moments that hurt. But it reveals something you deserve to know: you were not imagining the connection. You were not alone in feeling its weight. The bond mattered to them, even when their behavior failed to communicate it clearly. And now they are standing at an emotional threshold, realizing that the next thing they do may shape everything. Not through destiny or impossible promises, but through choice. Through whether they remain hidden or finally speak. Through whether they continue protecting their pride or begin protecting the connection. For the first time, they are asking themselves a different question. Not, what if I say too much, but, what if I wait too long? That question has unsettled them more than they expected. It has made them revisit the memories they tried to dismiss. The way your voice softened when you trusted them. The way you remember details they thought no one noticed. The way your presence made ordinary moments feel meaningful. These were not small things. They were signs of a closeness they did not fully appreciate while it was unfolding. Now, from a little distance, they can see the shape of what they almost allowed to fade. And this is where the message becomes more personal. They are not pleading because they believe you owe them another chance. They are pleading because they want one honest moment before assumptions make the decision for both of you. They want you to read what they could not say aloud. They want you to know that beneath every hesitation was a feeling they did not know how to carry. They want you to understand that their fear was never really about you. It was about whether they could become the person this connection required them to be. And somewhere inside, they worried they would disappoint you. So they delayed. They waited to feel more certain, more prepared, more deserving. But love rarely arrives after we become perfectly ready. It often arrives while we are still learning how to be honest. That is the lesson they are finally accepting. Don't skip the silence between these words, because that is where the deepest truth is hiding. They miss the version of themselves that existed when they felt safe enough to speak with you. They miss the way you challenged them without trying to change them. They miss being understood before they had explained everything. And more than anything, they miss the possibility that the two of you were slowly building something neither of you needed to force. They know that possibility cannot remain untouched forever. It must either be met with truth or allowed to become a memory. This is why the message feels as though it might disappear. Not because the words will literally vanish, but because moments of honesty do not stay open indefinitely. Hearts adapt. People heal. Roads change. And the person who once waited eventually learns how to stop waiting. They sense that you may be reaching that point, and it has made them confront what they kept postponing. They do not want to interrupt your peace. They do not want to pull you backward. They only want to place the truth where silence used to be. The truth that you changed them. The truth that your absence has made your importance impossible to deny. The truth that they have imagined reaching out more times than you will ever know. Yet there is still one thing they have not revealed, one detail connected to the moment they nearly sent you the message and stopped. It was not doubt that stopped them. It was something they saw, something small but meaningful, that made them question whether they had already lost the right to speak. And when that detail is revealed, you will understand why their next words may be the most honest ones they have ever given you. There was no warning before that moment arrived. It appeared quietly, almost unnoticed, hidden inside an ordinary day. They were about to send the message. Their hand paused above the screen, their thoughts finally arranged into the honesty they had rehearsed countless times. Then something caught their attention. It was not a dramatic sign. It was not a shocking discovery. It was simply the realization that your life had continued moving, even while they had remained standing still. That single realization unsettled them more deeply than they expected. They understood that every day they delayed became another day in which you were learning how to live without the words they had promised themselves they would someday say. For the first time, they imagined what your silence might actually mean. Perhaps you were no longer waiting for explanations. Perhaps you had grown tired of searching for hidden meanings behind unfinished conversations. Or perhaps you had simply chosen peace over uncertainty. That possibility did not make them angry. It made them reflective. They asked themselves a question they had avoided for far too long. If I truly care, why have I expected patience without offering clarity? The answer did not arrive immediately. It unfolded slowly, like morning light finding its way through a room that had been dark for too long. What they discovered was surprisingly simple. They had confused protection with distance. They believed that by hiding their emotions, they were preventing disappointment. Instead, they had created the very misunderstanding they feared. Every conversation they shortened, every heartfelt sentence they replaced with something safer, every opportunity they quietly let pass, became another brick in a wall they never intended to build. Stay till the end, because this next realization changed the direction of everything. They remembered one conversation with you that seemed almost insignificant at the time. You had spoken with kindness that felt effortless. You were not asking for promises. You were not asking for certainty about the future. You only wanted honesty in the present. Somehow, that simple request frightened them. Honest words leave no place to hide. Once spoken, they become real. And reality asks us to become responsible for what we feel. Since then, they have replayed your voice more times than they can count. Not because they are trapped in the past, but because they finally hear things they missed before. They hear patience inside your questions. They hear quiet hope inside your pauses. They hear understanding that they mistook for expectation. Suddenly, memories that once seemed ordinary have become filled with meaning. Something important is waiting for you, because there is another truth they have only recently accepted. Love is not always lost through conflict. Sometimes it quietly fades beneath assumptions. One person assumes there will always be another tomorrow. The other assumes their feelings have gone unnoticed. Both remain silent for different reasons, while the distance between them slowly grows. They do not want that silence to write the ending of your story together. So they began writing a message unlike any they had ever written before. Not carefully crafted to sound perfect. Not edited until every vulnerable sentence disappeared. This time they decided to leave the imperfections exactly where they belonged. They wanted you to know the real person behind every hesitation. The person who smiled after hearing your name. The person who secretly celebrated your happiness, even from afar. The person who often wondered whether you somehow sensed that they were thinking about you at the exact same moment. They know they cannot rewrite yesterday. They know there are conversations that should have happened much sooner. But they also understand something beautiful about the present. As long as honesty still has a voice, hope has not completely disappeared. Don't skip this moment. There is one sentence they have written over and over again, deleting it every single time before anyone could read it. Not because it wasn't true, but because saying it would change everything that came after. Once those words are spoken, there is no returning to uncertainty. There is only truth. Tonight, as they looked at those unfinished words once again, they made a quiet promise to themselves. The next time they reach for you, they will not hide behind careful phrases or comfortable distance. They will finally reveal the one feeling they have protected for far too long. But before they send that message, one unexpected event is about to happen, something so ordinary on the surface, yet so deeply personal, that it will convince them this silence cannot continue any longer. Just when they thought another ordinary day would quietly pass, something unexpectedly gentle interrupted the rhythm they had grown used to. It was not a dramatic event. It was not a message arriving at the perfect time. It was a memory appearing without permission, vivid enough to make them stop whatever they were doing. They had experienced memories before, but this one felt different. It did not remind them of what they had lost. It reminded them of what they had never fully expressed. In that quiet moment, they realized that some feelings do not disappear simply because they remain unspoken. They wait patiently, growing clearer with time instead of fading away. They found themselves smiling at details they once overlooked. The way your conversations could turn an ordinary afternoon into something worth remembering. The way you listened without rushing to fill every silence. The way you noticed little things that others passed by without a second thought. Those memories were no longer random pieces of the past. Together, they formed a picture they could no longer ignore. You had become part of the way they understood comfort, hope, and possibility. And that realization carried a quiet weight they had never expected. Stay till the end, because the next thought changed the way they saw every unanswered message between you. For a long time, they believed that timing was something waiting somewhere in the future. They told themselves, when life becomes less complicated, when I understand my heart better, when I find the perfect words. But now they see how easily tomorrow can become another tomorrow, and then another. They understand that meaningful connections are not protected by waiting forever. They are protected by honesty arriving before uncertainty grows too strong. As this understanding settled in, they imagined what they would say if every fear suddenly disappeared. Surprisingly, they did not imagine a grand speech. They imagined something much quieter. They would tell you that your presence brought calm into moments when their own thoughts felt scattered. They would tell you that they admired your strength long before they ever found the courage to admit it. They would tell you that, even during seasons of silence, they never truly stopped wondering how you were, what made you smile, or whether you were finding the happiness you deserved. Something important is waiting for you, because there is one question they finally allowed themselves to answer honestly. If I never tell them the truth, what will I remember years from now? The answer came almost immediately. They would not remember the reasons they stayed silent. They would remember the opportunities they allowed to slip away. They would remember every sentence they rehearsed but never shared. They would remember wondering what might have happened if they had trusted your heart enough to let you see theirs. That answer stayed with them long after the question faded. For the first time, they stopped trying to predict every possible outcome. Instead, they focused on something much simpler. They wanted you to know that you mattered. Not because they expected anything in return. Not because they believed life should unfold according to their wishes. But because some truths become heavier the longer they remain hidden, and this truth had become impossible to carry alone. Don't skip this moment. They opened the message again. This time, they did not erase the first sentence. Their hands were still slightly uncertain, but their heart was no longer divided. The words came slowly, each one carrying more honesty than the last. There were no perfect phrases, no dramatic promises, no impossible guarantees. Only sincerity. Then they reached one final sentence. They stared at it longer than all the others combined. It was the sentence they had protected for so long because once you read it, you would finally understand what every silence, every hesitation, and every unfinished conversation had been trying to say all along. Their finger moved closer to the screen. The message was ready. Only one heartbeat remained before those hidden words would finally belong to you. The room around them felt unusually quiet, as though even the smallest sounds had stepped aside to make space for this moment. They looked at the message one final time, not searching for better words anymore, but searching for the courage to leave the words exactly as they were. For the first time, they realized that honesty does not need perfect grammar, flawless timing, or carefully rehearsed sentences. It only needs the willingness to be seen. Their finger rested above the screen, but before they pressed send, another thought gently interrupted them. What if they have already moved on? The question lingered longer than expected. It wasn't born from jealousy or regret. It came from respect. They knew life continues, even when unanswered feelings remain behind. They understood that your heart deserved peace, not endless waiting. And yet, beneath that understanding was a quiet hope they couldn't explain. A hope that perhaps the connection had not completely disappeared, only grown silent while both of you searched for the courage to meet it again. Stay till the end, because what happened next was not planned, yet it gave them a reason they had been searching for. Just as they were about to close the message once again, something reminded them of you in the gentlest way imaginable. A familiar phrase. A melody they hadn't heard in months. A place they passed without thinking. It didn't matter which one it was. What mattered was how instantly it brought your presence into the room. Some people call these moments coincidence. They simply called it clarity. It became impossible to ignore how naturally your memory continued to find its way into ordinary days. Not as a distraction, but as a quiet reminder of someone whose impact had never truly faded. For a long while, they believed memories became weaker with time. Instead, yours became more honest. The unnecessary details disappeared, leaving only what mattered most. Your patience. Your warmth. The way you made conversations feel safe enough for vulnerability. The calm that arrived whenever you genuinely listened instead of simply waiting to speak. Those were the things they carried with them. Those were the things they never managed to replace. Something important is waiting for you. Because while reading through the message one last time, they noticed a sentence they hadn't intended to write. It wasn't planned. It wasn't carefully crafted. It simply appeared. I never wanted distance. I only ran out of courage. They stared at those words. For several quiet minutes, they considered deleting them. Those words revealed too much. They exposed every excuse that had hidden behind silence. They admitted that the problem had never been a lack of feeling. It had been the fear of revealing how deep those feelings truly were. Slowly, they leaned back and closed their eyes. For the first time in what felt like forever, they stopped asking themselves how the message would be received. Instead, they asked a different question. If these were the last honest words I could ever send, would they reflect my heart? The answer came with surprising peace. Yes. Not because the message was perfect, but because it was finally real. Don't skip this part. There is something quietly powerful about reaching the point where fear no longer decides every action. That is where they found themselves. They understood that your response was never something they could control. What they could control was whether they allowed another meaningful opportunity to disappear beneath hesitation. So they made one final adjustment. Not to the wording. Not to the emotion. Only to the ending. Instead of asking for promises. Instead of asking you to return immediately. Instead of asking you to erase everything that had happened. They chose a single closing thought. One sentence. Simple. Honest. Gentle. A sentence that carried no pressure, only truth. It read, "If there is still a small place in your heart willing to hear mine, I will meet you there with nothing hidden." They looked at those words for a long time. Then, without changing another letter, they pressed send. The message disappeared from their screen. But almost immediately, something unexpected appeared in its place. It wasn't your reply. It wasn't a notification. It was something they had completely forgotten existed, something connected to the very beginning of your story together. And the moment they saw it, they whispered softly to themselves. So that's why this was never meant to end with silence.